Hey, Eagles fans, this is Chris Franklin from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the No-Huddle Show podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, before we begin, I want to remind you that you can read our content on NJ.com/Eagles, and be sure to bookmark it to get the latest Eagles news and analysis. Today, I'm once again joined by my No-Huddle Show co-hosts Bob Brookover and Cayden Steele. Well, the Eagles have another week of football to play after they beat the Green Bay Packers 22-10 in the wild card round, and they move forward to face the Los Angeles Rams in a divisional round. And we'll get all into that right now. But first, Bob and Cayden, how are you guys doing?
Hey, Chris, ready for some more football? This is not a real thriller against the Packers, low scoring, and we'll see what the Rams bring. You know, they're going to have a tough week here, short week. They played on Monday. There's still fires out there where they're in their home. They had to travel because of that. They had to travel. What should have been a home game became a little bit of an away game. Then they traveled back. Now they got to travel cross country. It's a big ask of the Rams to come to Philadelphia and win this game. So it should be an interesting week.
Yeah, it's a couple different factors there going to that game that could impact it. We'll definitely get into that. Cayden, how you doing?
Yeah, doing great, Chris. Excited for this game as well, and just to see how this team responds after last week. I know there's been some criticism about certain areas, including the pass game, which I know we'll touch on. Just curious to see how this team goes out there and plays. That early in the year, they beat the Rams by 20 points, but this doesn't look like the same Rams team over the last month, and especially with the way they beat the Vikings, who I knew are reeling, but they look pretty good. So this might be a more challenging matchup. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Nice. And it definitely should be. You got a team that they're coming off a very dominant win themselves over the Minnesota Vikings. And one thing that the Eagles will have to do in order to keep this offense and put some points on the board is throw the ball around. And when you look at the numbers from last week, quarterback Jalen Hurts, who was making his first start since he suffered that concussion in Week 16 against the Washington Commanders, finished 13 of 21, throwing for 131 yards, 2 touchdowns, quarterback rating of 111.4. When you look at the overall numbers, just net yards, the Eagles finished with 121 net yards because of a couple sacks as well, too. Offense, he was able to still put up points on the board. He had some good field position, especially on that first drive after the forced fumble, the fumble recovery on the kickoff. There were times before, especially in those one section of that game where they punted 4 straight times and the offense, the whole entire offense looked disconjointed, including the passing offense. Bob, I'm going to start with you on this one. Do you think the passing game will bounce back against the Rams?
Yes, it depends on what I don't know what people expect from the passing game these days. The Eagles are what they are. They are not a team built around the pass, even though they have two terrific wide receivers and a great tight end. Their MO all year has been being a run team. They're number 2 run team in the league. They're 32nd last in the league in pass attempts, 29th in yards. But when they have to be a good passing team, they can be a good passing team. Nick Sirianni likes to talk about efficiency. And when you talk about efficiency, so let's look at how many games since the bye week, Jalen Hurts has had a plus 100 rating. It's every week except 2, unless you count the Washington game where we only threw 4 passes. You got to throw that game out. So every week except for 2, one of those was against Baltimore. He had a 93.7. The other one was against Washington. He had an 88.5. He played fine in that game. He threw for 221 and didn't have any turnovers. I mean, the passing game is about efficiency with this team. And I just think if the Rams think they could come in and, shut down Saquon Barkley, I don't think you can do that, A. But also, B, if you're going to sell out entirely on shutting down Saquon Barkley, you're going to be in trouble. We're not that far removed from the week before Jalen had his concussion, and everybody was concerned about the passing game because they'd only had 108 yards against the Panthers the week before at 118 against the Ravens. By the way, they won both of those games. And then Jalen came out through for 290, completed 25 of 32 for 2 touchdowns. Is that what you all wanted to see? That's still there in my mind. I have no doubt about that.
It sounds like you're going to Gladiator. Are you not entertained approach with this one in terms of that? Sounds like you're going with that one. Cayden, what about you? What do you think the passing game will bounce back this week?
Yeah, I think they will. Obviously, that lull that when Hurts went 0 for 7, and those are things that you don't want to happen, especially when you start playing better teams in the playoffs. But kind of chalked it up, a little bit. I know they don't chalk it up to that. I mean, but you think, some of it has to do with rust and chemistry and just overall. I mean, it was the first playoff game. I think the team will continue to get better. Bob made a good point. We've seen them when they've been criticized for the passing game struggling, and then they come back the next week like they did against the Steelers. And just morally, I think they'll play well against the Rams and get the passing game going a little more. Maybe I'm not going to throw for 400 yards or 300 yards, but I think they'll be more efficient. I think there'll be some explosive plays to be had because I don't think this Rams secondary is very good. And I know Green Bay's secondary wasn't either, but I just think they could take advantage of Darius Williams and the Ahkello Witherspoons of the world and a young group of safeties led by back here Cameron Kitchens and Jalen. Excuse me, I don't know his last name, but the undrafted rookie that they have back there as well, and Quentin Lake. I mean, there's just guys that I think that the Eagles could pick on. I think AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, if you still believe in them, which you should, there's probably a big game coming for one of them. I think Dallas Goedert showed you last week that he, while he's been hurt the last few years, he can still make a lot of plays in the passing game. I think they have a lot of different weapons. The Rams' passing defense is not that good. I know they shut down Minnesota, and which is a sign maybe they're starting to play better. But I also starting to think that Minnesota kind of is will start regressing at the wrong time overall as a team. I think the Eagles could take advantage of a lot of different parts. They have more talent. They have a good matchup, and I expect Jalen Hurts to bounce back. We've seen him throughout his career where he maybe doesn't have his best game, but then the next week he plays well. So, yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think you both make some very, very good points in terms of that. I think especially when you look at Jalen McCullough and Quinn Lake, I think the Eagles can take advantage of that. I know Lake had a really good game against the Vikings. He was all around the line of scrimmage and he was making a lot of plays. He got some pass breakups, what have you. But I think especially if you go into the slot, if you go in and you attack the slot, I think you can team. You can attack the outside. Those are, I think, especially the matchup with Darius Williams versus A.J. Brown. We saw the first game. Brown had 4 catches for 86 yards, and that was all without Devontae Smith being on the field. And I think that turns things a little bit as well, too. I think they'll be able to do that because we'll see a lot of attention going to Saquon Barkley. A lot of attention going. I was like, sounds like a cat toy you own. So where's your shiny ball? Okay, everybody. I think all the Rams defenders are going to look and know where he's at and watch that. And I think you get a lot of stuff, especially in ultra play action pass, and take the Eagles take some shots there, and they can truly get some opportunities there. Okay, I'm going to stick with you on this one. When you look at the defensively, Eagles lost a huge piece of their defense in terms of linebacker Nakobe Dean, who's out for the season now with a torn patella tendon, and they don't know if he's going to be ready for the start of the 2025 season. And you're going to have Vic Fangio said on Tuesday that they're going to start with using the combination of both Oren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. to replace him. Do you think that will be enough to be able to win Sunday, and how do you think they will do?
I think it might be able to win enough to win on Sunday because when I look at this Eagles defense, I think they're elite in a lot of different areas. In the back seven, with the corners and the safeties up front with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith are emerging. I still believe this defense is going to play well. I think Vic Fangio is a good coach. He's proven before that he can get the most out of players. So if you have that confidence that maybe he can get a lot out of Oren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter, I think especially then they'll be fine. So I think they'll do enough to win. So I still think this defense is going to be an overall really good unit. I don't think there's going to be a thing where they kind of go from being elite to not very good. But there could be some level of drop off, and maybe you could see it in this game. I mean, these guys are going to have to be able to cover, tight ends and running backs, and I'm not sure if Oren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter can do that. I mean, the knock on Trotter coming out was the athleticism coming out of Clemson. He wasn't the world's greatest athlete. It's the reason he fell to the 5th round, or one of the reasons. And Oren Burks he's been a backup, and we saw him struggle in the Super Bowl last year in a big stage. And he came into the Packers game. I thought he did some things well, but he also missed some tackles in that game as well. And no one's going to be able to replace Nakobe Dean, who was a great run defender. He was a leader on the defense. But maybe if you had this platoon, it's enough. And I do think it'll be enough to beat the Rams. But just because it's enough to beat the Rams doesn't mean it's not a concern going forward. When you look at the team going into the playoffs, you would say, and I think we've talked about on the podcast last week, there was no visible weaknesses on the Eagles, especially on the defensive side with how they play. But now they have one where you have smart offensive minds like Sean McVay. And if they win this week and then the other side, Detroit wins, you have a smart offensive mind like Ben Johnson, who knows, how to take advantage of poor linebacker play. And I'm not saying Oren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter will do that, will be poor. But if they do struggle, I mean, that becomes a big problem. So I think they can win against the Rams. They have enough probably, but it's going to be tougher, and good offensive minds could take advantage of it. And Vic Fangio, that's why he's been so good throughout his career. He's been able to adjust, and we'll see how he's able to put, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Oren Burks in the best positions.
Hey, Bob, what do you think? How do you think Oren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. will do replacing Nakobe Dean?
Well, I'll start by saying Nakobe just had an incredible season. After struggling with injuries his first 2 years, he came out his third season and was just lights out. Even in that game, I mean, the play he made, he got hurt on, was a 3-yard loss where he just read the play, took down Tucker Kraft for a 3-yard loss. It was instrumental in driving the, Packers back a little bit, and the Packers were really getting their first offensive movement of the game, ended up missing a field goal on that drive. A few plays before, I think he had a tackle for a 6-yard loss, so he had 2 tackles for losses in that game. He had an incredible season, and yeah, he's going to be missed because he was just so good. I mean, I think Vic Fangio said it best a couple weeks ago. He was asked about Nakobe, and he said, a lot of people are talking about the year Zach Bond's happening with good reason because he's had a great season, but he said Nakobe's been pretty close, and Nakobe was pretty close to playing just about as well as Zach has played this year. I mean, it was a great the Eagles linebacker story is a great story. Having said that, so if you're going to have an injury, you're going to pick a spot where the Eagles might be able to absorb an injury. Maybe linebacker is the best one for this reason. So you end the season. Nakobe couldn't play in the game where they had to win to clinch the division against the Cowboys. So you send both Jeremiah Trotter and Oren Burks out there as starters that day. I'm sorry. You sent them out there to split time that day with Oren getting the majority of the time. But both of them getting some substantial playing time. They both played very well. The Eagles win 41-7, dominate the game. And then a week later, you rest all your starters, and both Oren Burks and Jeremiah Trotter are on the field. One of them has 17 tackles. The other one has 11. You feel pretty good about that. They're playing against the Giants starters. I know it's the Giants, but still, they were playing against first-team players, and they both had outstanding games. And Oren Burks is a guy, experience at the Wazoo. There's only one player on this whole team that has played more playoff games than Oren Burks, and that's Lane Johnson. So you couldn't ask for a better situation out of a bad situation than you're getting with Orrin and Jeremiah Trotter being the guys that are stepping in. And Vic has really liked the way that Jeremiah Trotter's handled his rookie season. This guy's he's got pedigree. His dad was a pretty good player. I watched him play some playoff games too. So yeah, I think they can handle this. But having said that, Nakobe had a great season.
Yeah, I think when you look at all this too, like the way he was reading plays, the way he was blowing them up in a way, I think that's huge. And then you also look at the way he was just like, to me, he was the soul of that defense in a way where he would be able, not only would he just he had the green light and calling the defense, but also he was the one that really got him up. Everybody looked towards him in the huddle when things were going bad. They turned to him and he'd say something. And now you had to rely on guys like C.J. Gardner-Johnson at safety, Jordan Davis when he's on there, and some of the other guys to pick up and fill that role. But when you look at that linebacker position overall, it's definitely changed. Like we were talking about last year, we look at last year's compared to this year. Yeah, Nicholas Morrow, and Morrow started 12 games for his team. Now he's on the team just signed him to the practice squad because they needed somebody to fill in for him. And you have this depth now to really try to help you. And you mentioned Burks as well, too, that in terms of experience he has in the playoffs game, that's going to be huge. And then also I think something that might play a factor into it was that he's seen this Rams defense a lot, being beforehand with the 49ers, and they have him play him twice a year. He actually started 2 games. He had 14 tackles in those 2 games against them over the last 2 seasons. So he's coming to a situation where you should feel comfortable in what he sees with. It's a matter of, for them, the one thing I want to watch for them is I think the Rams are going to try to get like Kyren Williams. They try to get him matched up against either one of them, either whether it be Burks or Trotter. They just have to do their best they can to keep them in front of them and wrap them up and not give up a big play at the wrong time. So that's the thing to watch for. I think another thing to watch for as that game progresses. Now, staying on that side of the ball, Nolan Smith had a really good game last week. He had 2 sacks, and he also had he also played some special teams as well too, getting and stopping the Packers and Keyshawn Nixon in the return game and helping out on that side of the ball. Bob, I'll stay with you on this one. Do you think Nolan Smith can sustain the level of play and be counted on for at least a sack after getting 2 last week against the Packers?
Well, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but if you can see me right now, my hand would be reaching around to pat myself on the back, because if we recall last week, we had X Factors. And who was Bob's X Factor? That's right, Nolan Smith. And I said at the time, it's unusual to have a starter as an X Factor. But, he wasn't a starter at the beginning of the season. He worked into that role. But to answer your question, yes, I think he can sustain. He's been sustaining it for weeks and weeks and weeks. Now, it was his best game of the year against the Packers. He was dominant. In that first sack, he just abused the tackle to get to Jordan Love. But the stat, I love this stat. 2, or let's see, 7, 12, 16, 19. He finished the season with 19 pressures in his last 6 games, doubling his total. And then he goes against the Packers, and he has 5 more and 2 sacks. He's just playing lights out. I mean, yeah, he can sustain it because he's in the midst of sustaining. He's in the midst of becoming a star edge rusher. I mean, it's his motor. It was cool to see him get the game ball from Nick Sirianni after that game, because I mean, you can just see that the light went on for this guy, and he's there. He's a star. He's a star in the making, on the rise, and I see no reason why it's not going to continue.
Nice. What do you think, Cayden? Think he can sustain this level of play?
Yeah, I think the trajectory says so. And it's not just the Green Bay game. It's how he's been playing, honestly, since October. I know the sacks haven't always come, but he's gotten pressure on the quarterbacks. And overall, I mean, and his teammates talk about it a lot, the dirty work that he does in the run game, taking on double teams, taking on pulling guards and tackles, and taking and just throwing the tight ends on the ground in the run game and just creating a mess up front. He's been a really good player this year, which is good for him, especially after last year. There was a lot of criticism surrounding him. People were concerned about the lack of impact that he made. In the first month, he was kind of quiet. Then he started to come on, and especially after Brandon Graham's gotten hurt, he's become the number one pass rusher on the team in my eyes. I know Josh Sweat's been here for a long time, since 2018, and he's been a pretty productive guy, but Nolan's combination of athleticism and just the effort that he plays with, I agree with Bob's assessment that he's an ascending, star, quality starter that you can rely upon in the playoffs to get you a sack. And I think he'll be able to. This Rams offensive line, I think, is strong in the interior with Avila. And I think Havasine's a decent player there, but there might be some matchups that you're able to win up front on the other side against Alaric Jackson or even Havasine. I mean, Nolan Smith is a quick, twitchy edge rusher. I think that's always been his thing, but now you're starting to see it come with power as well. He beat Zach Tom in the Packers game, gets him off balance, goes back inside for that first sack that killed a drive. And then later, and he finishes it off by beating Rasheed Walker, and which helped kill another Packers drive. So I mean, if he could be a drive killer, which he's shown that he can be, it's going to be good for the Eagles defense going forward. And he's shown that he could beat good offensive tackles in this league. It's not just backups. Nolan Smith's been coming on, and I think you can rely upon him to not only get after the quarterback, but also stop the run consistently, which has helped the Eagles defense play so well recently.
Yeah, and I think his emergence is key in one other area as well too, because teams like there's little tweaks as well too, where teams put Carter, try to put him on the left side because you weren't getting Bryce Huff getting that production off the edge and getting that pressure. So now all of a sudden, remember what happened. Now I know so early, not calling him Nolan Smith, Hassan Reddick, but we saw at least when you have a presence on that left side, it's these teams can't slide that offensive line. So now if you're the Rams, or if you're Matthew Stafford walking up and you're looking at the defensive line, you're like, okay, I can't slide the protection to the left, the offensive left, because I know I got to worry about Nolan Smith. Can't slide to the right because if Smith's playing really well, I'm leaving Josh Sweat open. And you still got to worry about Jalen Carter and Milton Williams and Mauro Jomo. Now you can throw his name in there now in terms of the pass rush and success getting past this guy. You can't slide this line. So the one thing I want to watch, and I know it was causation, and Brandon Graham was dealing with stuff beforehand, and with his triceps, stuff like that, it was sore. But they're going to try to trip these guys, and they're probably try to get the ball out quick with these slants and quick outs and what have you, try to frustrate that pass rush, not let them get to you. It's in a way, I hope Vic Fangio tells the corners to go up and play a little bit more press with Slay and Quinyon Mitchell, because if they do that, and we've seen the capabilities of them in coverage, Stafford might have to hold the ball long, and we know he's not that mobile. He's not a statue per se, but he's not that far off. So there could be some opportunities to get some sacks in this game, and he's going to have some opportunities and to put Stafford in third and long situations in terms of that. And okay, we're going to move on to our run pass options segment of the show. And with that, I want to read a statement, and if Bob or Cayden agrees, they'll run with it and explain why. If they disagree, they'll pass and they'll give a reason why. And here we go. Bob, we'll start with you. Saquon Barkley, we know the game he had the last time against the Rams. He'll have at least 130 rushing yards against the Rams this time, even with the increased focus. Are you running or are you passing?
I'm going to run with that because this guy had more than 130 yards 7 times this season, including the last 2 games of the regular season. And if not for a safely sliding into home plate last week against the Packers to pretty much end the game, he would have gone over 130 again for the 3rd straight week. It's not like the Rams are a great run defense. They were torched by this guy, and they're going to have deploy a different strategy in this game because they know if they give up 255 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns to Saquon Barkley, they'll be going back to Los Angeles and not have any more games to play this year. That said, this is based a lot on. I talked for a while yesterday with Jordan Mailata specifically, but both Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. And Jordan really wasn't happy with the way the Eagles run blocked on Sunday against the Packers. He said the communication wasn't as good as it should have been. It's been a point of emphasis this week as they get ready to play the Rams. Jordan had a lot of interesting things to say. He also said the Vikings flat out pissed him off the way they played. He said, I looked at it and I'm like, what is this strategy? I found that very funny. And they're just not going to be able to do the things to the Vikings that they did to the Eagles. I mean, that they did to the Vikings. I just think if they try to stop the run, the Eagles will be able to throw the ball efficiently and make them have to back off on going all in on Saquon. So to answer your question, yes, I think he goes over 130 yards again this week. Saquon, I just think is, living in the moment after all those years of misery with the Giants and not playing these playoff games. He's really living in the moment in this postseason run, and I think we're in the midst of seeing him have a great postseason. I don't know how it's going to end up, but it got off to a good start against the Packers. I think great lies ahead.
What do you think, Cayden? Are you running or are you passing?
Yeah, I'm going to run that. He's going to get 130 yards still. I get the Rams defense has been playing well, especially over the last month. They dominated the Vikings, and the Vikings could never really establish a run game. But at the same time, the Vikings are the 19th team in rushing. The offensive line, there is no comparison between the Eagles' offensive line and the Vikings' offensive line. They also lost their right tackle in the middle of that game, already hurting their line that was already depleted from earlier in the year when they lost Christian Darrisaw and they had to trade for Ken Robinson. I mean, just the Vikings didn't have the formula to get the ground game going, to take the pressure off Sam Darnold. I think the Rams' best attribute as a defense is when they're able to shut down the run, though, and you let these young pass rushers kind of pin their ears back. And Chris Rouleau seems like a good defensive mind and being able to send different pressures, and it got Sam Darnold off for sure. Kind of like the same recipe that the Lions used the week before. But I don't think they'll be able just to stop the run just consistently enough. The other teams they stopped the run against at the end of the year, and people were talking about the progress they've made against the Cardinals, who James Conner got hurt in the middle of the game, against the Jets, who weren't able to run the ball all year. Bottom the NFL running the ball. Breece Hall struggled the entire season. A 49ers team that didn't have Christian McCaffrey. It's just a different test. And the last time we saw these two teams play, I know it was 2 months ago, but I mean, Saquon had a spectacular for going for 255 yards. I'm not sure if he'll be able to repeat that, but I think he'll definitely be able to go over 130. I think the Eagles, if they can win at the line of scrimmage, which I expect them to do, and take away guys like Brandon Fisk and Kobe Turner and Jared Verse from getting penetration in the backfield. I don't believe in the Rams linebackers. I think it's one of the weaknesses on this defense. A defense that has been playing well, but I just think personnel-wise aren't good enough to match up with Philly. I mean, guys like Omar Spates and Christian Roseboom, I think if Saquon gets to the second level, good luck for the Rams defense. And I think he will get to the second level a decent bit. So I'll take 130 for start running with it.
Yeah, one thing to watch as well, too, the Rams really have fixed their run defense since that. I mean, they almost got embarrassed. They got embarrassed that night to do that. Yeah, they've only allowed, including the Monday night's wildcard game, 104 yards on the ground rushing, which it's still a decent amount, but at least it wasn't what the Eagles did or to them. Is crazy. And we're going to look at another game on the side for the run-pass option that's in the NFC. The Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions. And I'm going to start with you, Cayden, on this question. The Lions and Commanders' final score will be a one-possession game. Are you running with that or are you passing?
I'll pass. And look, the Commanders have been playing well, especially after they lost to the Eagles in November. They've seen, and then they lost to the Cowboys. But ever since then, they bounced back. They beat the Titans. They beat beat the Saints in a tight game. They beat the Eagles without Hurts. They beat the Falcons. I mean, they've won every game since then. They beat the Buccaneers. I think a challenging Buccaneers team. Maybe not a great team, but a team that is definitely challenging. I mean, Jayden Daniels has been absolutely incredible as a rookie. Terry McLaurin's been great this year. I think Dan Quinn's done a good job. They have pieces on that defense that you have to be excited about going forward, including Mike Sanders and the linebacker play with Frankie Louva and Bobby Wagner. I mean, they have a lot of different elements that you have to feel good about, especially with their future going forward with Jayden Daniels. I just don't think this is a great matchup. I think they might be able to score a little bit on Detroit's banged up defense, but I just don't see them keeping up with Detroit's offense. Detroit is rested, which gave them more time to get healthy. It's in Detroit. I just think this moment's going to be too big. I mean, I think a couple years from now, we might be talking about Jayden Daniels as an MVP candidate. We might be talking about the Commanders as a legit Super Bowl contender because it looks like they found their quarterback. But just in this moment, I think it's going to be too much to be able to stop, especially the guys in the secondary, be able to stop Jameson Williams and Amon St. Brown and Sam, Laporta. And I mean, the offensive line is just physical. I just think they could wear down Washington. They have a lot of different matchups that they could win. And a feel-good story for the Commanders, I think, will come to an end on Sunday. And I think they'll lose by I'm going to say 2 touchdowns at least.
And what do you think, Bob? When it comes to that Lions Commanders game, do you feel it's going to be a one possession game? Are you going to run with that, or are you going to pass with that?
I'm tempted to run with it because Washington's been such a good story, and 13 of their 18 games this season, including their last how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, including their last 5. Have been one possession games. That's who they've been all year. To get these teams into the fourth quarter. We saw it against the Eagles, and Jayden Daniels plays hero, puts on his Superman cape, and they win in the final minute. It's been a great run for them. But then I remembered something. Josh Harris owns the Commanders now, and Josh Harris teams, one being the Sixers, the other being the Devils, never make it past the second round. Always disappoint in the second round. And they're going to disappoint again in the second round. And I'm going to go with a reason different than Cayden. Cayden mentioned the Lions passing game, but I would say that the Lions are getting David Montgomery back. That 1-2 punch of David Montgomery and Jamar Gibbs, which I see in the Eagles' future. And when we were talking about that linebacker play, that's going to be a real challenge for the Eagles, especially in Detroit, if they have to play that. But I think it's going to be too big a challenge for the Commanders, who are the number 30 rushing defense in the NFL. Don't particularly play the run very well. Been a great story, as Cayden just detailed, all year. But Josh Harris teams always go out in the second round, and they're going to go out with a thud and lose by more than one score here. And we'll see how they bounce back next season. But the streak for Josh Harris is going to continue.
With that,
you enjoyed that, didn't you, Chris?
Because I've seen it happen so many times with both the Devils and especially the Sixers down here. Yeah,
that was in memory of Joel Embiid.
No, you bring back flashbacks. I covered the Sixers for half a season, and yeah, the year they should have gone in the Trae Young year, the Ben Simmons back away year. That was fun. Oh boy, that team stinks. Anywho, in terms of that, we're going to the 2-minute drill now, and where I'm going to ask each of these guys a question. They'll have 2 minutes to answer it. If they don't finish, they'll hear a whistle, meaning their time's up, and it's playoffs, so they'll be eliminated from the 2-minute warning from here on out. Just kidding. Maybe, I don't know. I just wing it when it goes along with this segment. Anywho, we'll start with you, Cayden, on this one in a 2-minute drill. It's going to sound like a match game when it comes to this question. For the Eagles to move on, they need to do blank. Your time starts now.
Yeah. For the Eagles to move on, they need to do what they did in the first game. In the first game, what happened is the Rams got off to a hot start, and they seemingly always have that capability. I mean, they did it against the Vikings too. They scored a touchdown in the first drive, a field goal in the second. Sean McVay is a great offensive mind, especially his opening scripts and the creativity that he uses to get guys like Puka Nacua open and Cooper Kupp. And now he's got Tyler Higbee back in the fold, and they didn't have him when they played against the Eagles. And Kyrie Williams, I mean, he's just very creative early on, and they can get on you early. Like they didn't score on the first drive against the Eagles because they fumbled, but they got down to the 17-yard line in 5 plays. And then they scored on the next drive, but that's when Vic Fangio adjusted to what the Rams were doing, and then it was punt, 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 to end the half. I know that, and then they didn't score a touchdown again until the beginning of the second half. I think if Vic Fangio and this defense can slow down Matthew Stafford after the first 2 drives, and honestly, if they could just take away the opening scripts, if they can make them less effective, if they can play good on those first 2 drives, I think they could dominate this game. And the simple answer is this: to win, they just have to play the style that they've been playing. Take away the football, be dominant on defense, and offense. Don't try to get into a shootout versus Matthew Stafford, because I don't think they'd win that type of game. The Rams showed you they can win that type of game against anyone, including the Bills in December. So I don't think that's how the Eagles want to play. But take away, the Rams' offense, be able to slow down what Sean McVay wants to do, and then just go on offense and run the ball. And that's how the Eagles will beat the Rams.
Good job. Yeah, there's 12 seconds left on there. So, yes, I might have to do it at a 150-minute or institute some roadblock or something, because you guys are getting timed it down very well. But it's a good job in terms of that. Bob,
Are you cheering against us?
I'm trying. I got to throw it in there. It's like a Mr. Beast thing. I got to throw something you're not really expecting right now. You guys are you're making it efficient. You're scoring at a high wills. I can't call penalties. I mean, I call false starts in terms of the clock, or I can't call holding or something. But got to do something. You guys are doing too well. I commend you for it. All right, Bob. For you, same question to you. For the Eagles to move on, they need to do blank. Your time starts now.
I feel like I gave this answer a week or 2 ago. Maybe I don't know, to maybe do a little bit different question, but my answer is keep doing what they're doing. Everybody wants to pick this team apart, pick the passing game apart. Oh, they only had 190 yards of offense. Oh, they didn't do this. Oh, they didn't do that. Oh, Jalen can't do this. Oh, Jalen went 0 for 7 in the middle of the game and didn't complete a pass for more than a quarter, nearly 2 quarters. Blah, 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 blah. The Eagles beat the Packers 22-10. Let's just take that score right there. The Packers didn't lose a game by more than 10 points all season, and that was one. They lost to the Lions 24-14. The Giants, in that game, the Lions had a very similar stat line to the Eagles in terms of total offense. The Packers, did a good job of shutting down both their pass and running game, and still lost 24-14. The Eagles beat them 22-10. Biggest loss of the season for the Packers, but it gets picked apart because there wasn't enough of this and enough of that. The Eagles really, in my mind, have not lost a game. Not in my mind. It's just the truth. With Jalen Hurts a quarterback since the bye week. That was the last game, and that game they lost without Lane Johnson, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Hurts. The first time they played the Rams, they played them without Devontae Smith. I think, as you pointed out earlier, Chris or Cayden, I forget which one, but they won. The final score was 37-20. It was really 37-14 with seconds left. They beat the Rams bad. They haven't lost a game with Jalen Hurts a quarterback since week 4 of this season. And they nearly won that Commanders game. And I in my heart, I believe they win that game if Jalen plays. They were off to maybe their hottest start of the season. So for the Eagles, just keep doing what they're doing. That's all they need to do.
2 seconds left. See, you guys get it. 2 seconds left. I got to change. I got to come up with something. If the Eagles win this week, I got
just you were in playoff form.
Yeah, I might have to do
on our way to the Super Bowl podcasts.
I would say I might have to do my a Sean Smith and find a way, not eject you, but find something that do something that to change it up. It might be crazy. Oh goodness! Well,
don't knock my helmet off.
No.
If you do, you're still going to get the one that's going to ejected and fined.
Oh, it's crazy. Well, guys, I thank you guys very much for joining me. We all thank you out there for listening to this podcast. Make sure to continue to watch NJ.com/Eagles. We'll have all the coverage leading up to the game, during the game, and after the game of this divisional round playoff against the Los Angeles Rams. So for Cayden Steele and Bob Brookover, I'm Chris Franklin. Everybody have a good one. See ya.